la Fuente, General Manager of LAC TLD. Gonzalo Balseiro from URSEC is here, the regulating entity in Uruguay, and Jorge Alberto Bacaloni, who is the anti-piracy manager of DirecTV and chair of the Alliance Against Piracy. The topic is blocking as a tool to combat piracy. The panel also includes in person the presence of Ernesto Majo, the CEO of LACNIC, Sergio Piris, who is the lawyer and specialized on anti-piracy and legal requirements, and this is Basilio Rodriguez Perez, chair of LAC ISP, Federation of Internet Providers of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Hola.
So, hello. Can the remote participants hear me? Yes, thank you. So let us start. I don't know whether I have time until 4 p.m. or a bit more. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rocío de la Fuente. I'm the General Manager of LAC TLD, the association that brings together the CCTLDs of Latin America and the Caribbean. And I'm very happy to welcome this panel, where we'll be speaking of a topic that, although this is not new, is very topical and poses many challenges, namely blocking websites and IP addresses as a tool to fight illegal content piracy. We can say that piracy is an event that has different dimensions involving different players, users, the rights holders, the service providers, the legal authorities, and the technical community. In this context, blockings often is a response that can be considered a rapid solution, but has a structural and profound impact on the operation of the internet. That is why we want to have an open, plural, and informed discussion to see how effective blockings can be, what the advantages are, what the risks and undesired consequences are, in addition to together reflect on alternative solutions that can be sustainable and lesser harmful impact on the architecture for internet operations. Having made this introduction, allow me to introduce the panelists. First of all, let's welcome Ernesto Major. He is a CEO at LACNIC. Ernesto also is an agronomist. We have Sergio Piris, who is a lawyer and is a lawyer on piracy issues at Telecom Argentina. He's also president of the Anti-Piracy Civil Society of Argentina. Gonzalo Balseiro, who is participating remotely. He is an economist and a faculty member at university. He is the chair of URSEC, which is a regulating entity for communication services in Uruguay. I would also like to welcome Jorge Bacaloni. He is a lawyer and regional manager for anti-piracy issues for Latin America at DirecTV. And also I'd like to introduce Basilio Rodrigo Perez, who is the president of LAC ISP, the Federation of Internet Providers and Associations of Latin America and the Caribbean. Basilio is also a member of ABRIN's board, the Brazilian Association of Internet Providers and Telecommunications. Thank you very much for joining us in this panel. We'll have 2 rounds of interventions. Each of the panelists will have 4 minutes. In this initial round, I would like to ask a general question to all of the panelists from your role and from the role you play in your organizations. How effective are blockings to fight piracy in the internet? What are the implications and what the advantages and disadvantages that you note? I will give the floor to Jorge Baccaroni first. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. We are the main promoters of this in the region. I am aware that this is a controversial topic. This is something where you have different standpoints, including the position that LACNIC has today. LACNIC is a position that is sort of opposed to what we are promoting. And I truly thank you for the opportunity of participating in this event in the awareness that they have reflecting this topic. Regarding this specific question, do we see blockings as an effective solution to fight against audiovisual piracy? This is a problem that involves many other issues. This is not only on topics related to violating intellectual property rights, but this is an entry channel for many other issues that come behind it. This has to do with piracy, for example, what has to do with illegal gaming, child pornography, and many other things promoted through piracy, in addition to how this might affect users through installing malware in the devices, in the to the networks. So we think that blockings are effective, but this is an effective measure in a given context. This also has to do with how intellectual property rights are, what internet analysis done, for example, seizing domains when actions are taken in a country, when domains haven't been registered in the country, like .com or .r or .pe. So we speak about these with the authority in charge of controlling the registries in the relevant countries and request blocking. So we also seek to remove all these contents, and then there might be remaining contents. This is an international type of crime. We won't find one single solution in one country. So then we have proceed to blocking orders. There are two different types of domain blockings. This is something they have orders to block IP addresses and to block internet service providers. The IP addresses often share services through the IP addresses assigned to different entities. So you might have servers, for example, that might be providing services through an IP to an illegal service, while at the same time they might be providing services to legal activities. So that is where people are fearful that when you block an IP address, this might be like collateral damage to another service. This normally does not occur because companies that invest in technology do things correctly, but analysis and mapping of the addresses is done. In the case of audiovisual piracy, most of the IPs that are blocked are dedicated IPs. Audiovisual piracy has a very high consumption and have their own servers. So we don't not so complex when you block these audiovisual IPs. Now, this is very often these IPs are related to sports events, and very often we have to block these until the sports event is over. Many comments are made regarding the fact that when IP address is blocked, a block is executed. This sort of generates a space in the internet that should be occupied. So we must not remember that this is a crime. This is a crime that takes place in the internet.
And blockings are also executed following other crimes like drug trafficking, child pornography, where multiple blockings are applied and no one questions the quick implementation of a measure of this nature when it comes to tackling more serious crimes. So blockings due to child pornography are quite common. These are, let's say, automated processes because no one can just Google and find child pornography, or it shouldn't be easy to buy drugs online. So that's why there are control mechanisms and it is blocked. So no one questions democracy online or the neutrality of the internet in those cases. Now, when we're speaking about audiovisual piracy, that's a different story and people might question it. Now, what aspects do we think that are not positive about blockings? Unfortunately, one of the main problems is that when there's a transboundary crime, these blockings are applied country by country after notification of the ISPs in a particular country. And the other problem that we are finding.
Sí, ya estamos en tu tiempo. Creo que
Jorge, sorry, but we are at a time. You've shared several ideas to allow for further debate. And Leah, let me just very quickly say that another problem is what happens with open domain servers. That is a problem, for example, in countries like Italy, France, Portugal, Belgium, where these orders are not only addressed to the ISPs but also companies that are the owner of these public domain name servers. Thank you very much. We'll now hand the floor over to Basilia from LAC ISP. I will speak about what happens in Brazil. In Brazil, ISPs receive every day orders for blockings for different IP addresses and internet domains for URLs. There are so many blockings, even some of them are sent on an Excel spreadsheet with thousands of IPs to be blocked. And that is a big work for the ISPs to be able to go ahead with those blockings. And what's even worse is that we do know that that is not very effective. There are many problems of IPs that are blocked and that no other there are other services under those IPs that need to be unblocked. We've received other requests from the legal system, not necessarily from the legal system to us directly, but through the regulator. And therefore the requests for blocking go to the regulators and then the regulator sends it to the ISP. Many requests for unblockings, IPs that had been blocked and that can no longer be blocked. And there are many blockings, domains that many times are not part of the vendors And the practical result is that many times this is not effective. When the smaller ISPs are connected to larger ones, they many times wait to see if the larger ones have gone ahead with the blockings. They do not waste time blocking within their own network. And there are some blockings that really are not effective. And we could even consider the possibility of blocking VPNs. There have been cases in Brazil where Twitter was blocked for a month, but many people accessed Twitter through a VPN, although someone could be detected as using a VPN. So we need better mechanisms for blockings. So in Brazil, we have decisions that already provide a start and end date for that blocking. So that means that the blocking has to start now and end in like 1 month, 2 months. So there are mechanisms of that nature in place. And this is due to different reasons. Sometimes it's due to malicious sites, gambling sites that are not legal, piracy. There are many types of blockings, and each and every one has different characteristics as to how to implement them. It is a big problem for everyone, even for ISPs, that many times they cannot block certain sites because it's not part of their network, it's not in their capacity to do it. But what I see many times is that judges do not understand the technical difficulties for such blockings. So the they demand it as if it were as easy as pushing a button and doing it, but it's not always as simple as that. Thank you, Basilio. It's very clear. The perspective of the ISPs is very clear. Let's now invite Gonzalo to share his ideas from the perspective of a regulatory entity. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be in this event. I want to thank LACNIC for the invitation, and I wanted to present the perspective of a regulator and the impact that blockings have in our country. We have three types due to, for different reasons, and they have a different nature and different results. In the first place, historically, the first blocking that was defined by law was in 2017, and this would block illegal gambling sites. The National Lottery Agency, under the Ministry of Economy and Finance, established the corresponding regulation in October 2017 as the regulatory authority over gambling in the country, and they would define what would be the gambling sites that were violating the law, and they would allow for illegal gambling to take place. So the first type of solution, where the National Lottery Authority makes a decision to block, it communicates the decision to URSEC, and URSEC communicates the blocking to the ISP. So we liaise between the National Lottery Authority and the ISPs. That was the first experience. Then the investigation is done by the National Lottery Authority. They decide the sites to be blocked, and through a resolution it establishes that blocking, and we communicate the ISPs to enforce those blockings. The second, in 2020, December 2020, is about the illegal streaming of cable TV. So the law states that the URSEC can sanction illegal cable TV services, including sanctions and provisional blockings, IP blocking. So the URSEC blocks those sites that the regulators shown there's proof of existence and communicates the resolution to the ISPs to enforce those blockings. The ISPs communicate once this is done, and these blockings are temporary, 30 days at the most. So once again, if they relapse, the procedure starts over, and that site needs to be blocked. That's the second type. The third time is to disable in real time online streaming. This is about sporting event. This law was passed in 2022. So 2017 was the first one, 2020 the sites, 2022 the illegal 2020 cable TV, and 2022 a new law was passed stating that operators that are the rights holders for sports online sporting event streaming can appear before URSEC, prove they are the owners of those rights for broadcasting, and URSEC will define a precautionary measure, an administrative precautionary measure. So URSEC will enforce the measure, and what do rights holders do? They appear before the ISPs directly and request blocking. Since this event is being streamed live, operators will have the power to appear before the ISPs directly and request such blockings. So the law was passed in 2022, and it is reinforced by different copyrights and other type of intellectual property regulations in Uruguay. So I just wanted to very quickly show the three types of blockings and the different measures that have been adopted by URSEC.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. And now I'd like to give the floor to Ernesto Majo from the technical community to see how they assess the effectiveness of blockings and the impact this has on the different dimensions. Good afternoon. To start with, as a technical organization, we have a technical approach. Our view has to do with looking at the functioning of the internet, and that is our major concern. We always seek to be helping so that definitely in each legal intervention or administrative intention, this does not have a significant impact. And in that sense, I must clarify that we don't promote any type of crime, of course. This is very far from our role. We are totally against these things happening, as would be the case of piracy linked to pornography, any type of crime. We're absolutely against those situations, but this does not imply that we might be in favor or somehow willing to support the implementation of blockings in a generalized way. We see all along the region there are initiatives in different countries that copy and learn from these experiences that occur in some countries. In some countries, yes, and others not so much. So definitely all those procedures end up being against the functioning of the internet. And that is what I was saying, that our concern is mostly from a technical standpoint, but ultimately, these blocking measures have a temporary effect most cases, but in some cases they have a permanent effect on resources that are essential for the functioning of the internet. As internet registry, we have a specific role of maintaining a registry and ensuring that this resource is available to the community for the operation and deployment of the networks and the application of blockings, very often without due technical precision, leads to some being affected permanently, and resources are then out of service that go beyond the administrative or legal action has determined. So this point has to do with the technical impact of blocking the functioning of internet, and also has to do with the lack of effectiveness that these have in order to control crime. We understand that actions in the short term are achieved, but they don't attack the real cause of the situation, which are the individuals. We permanently see, and operators are clear as to this, that content migrates from migrate addresses and sites, and we're permanently pursuing things that are ahead of what the measures we take. So the blocking ends up being ineffective because they block sites that are no longer active. And even worse, in many cases, addresses are blocked behind which there are thousands or millions of sites. Yesterday, there was a presentation where we saw a list of IP addresses, single IP addresses, and behind each address, there were millions of different websites, 28 million, 27 million, 25 million, and the list ended up in 5 million. So an administrative error, a typo in a decision of this nature affects millions or thousands of businesses, of individuals that are carrying out their activities and are providing services to their communities, and can even affect public services that might be using all these resources in a perfectly legitimate way, but resulting from an administrative decision, these are affected. It's not that this is exceptional and happens occasionally. There are permanent reports showing that every single week there are certain services or businesses that lose connectivity or the availability of the e-commerce sites or the small communication sites. So in that, well, this not only has a technical impact, which is what we are concerned about, but this also affects the individuals behind this, or using the network for the benefit and doing business and living and using this. So this is our concern, our main concern, and the impact, the generalized application of blockings to figure out a solution to something that is not solved, in fact, through blocking. And finally, I'm going to give the floor to Sergio Pires so that he can share with us the standpoint of Telecom Argentina regarding the effectiveness of blockings. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you. I'd like to thank LACNIC for this invitation. This is a topic that we have been dealing with for quite some time now. I represent a telecom communication that is very important in Argentina. I'd say this is the main telecom of Argentina that has presence in Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. We are an ISP, but we also deliver content through an OTT, Flow OTT, that is quite well known. And we are sort of on the two sides of the counter. I think that the topic of blocking addresses was not created properly, initially trying to apply it in situations with Jorge. We have been working a lot on the topic of piracy. Jorge has a lot of experience, but he comes from the operators' world. And I always say that we have to understand how companies work. There's no doubt to the fact that what the people who resell services like Magis TV are enormous companies that have an enormous gains, and all behind this there's organized crime. We have heard about this already. There's no doubt regarding that. Intellectual property deserves to be above all this, and should be defended. Is quite so. You want to watch Messi play and Ronaldo, and it's very expensive, and particularly the TV rights have to pay for this. That is on one hand, and I agree with that. But how do we apply this topic of blocking addresses? We don't say no to blocking, but how does this occur? Is this implemented? Well, and for example, in Argentina, you have the telecom stating that you don't agree with administrative blockings. These have to be legal blockings from a competent origin. So I am involved in penal law. In the Argentine digital law, and this was also ruled by the Supreme Court in Argentina, and yesterday there were talks, and the judges that are dealing with these lawsuits also deal with the competition law. So we have to apply a measure that is of a national scope. The judge that has to rule that blocking, do they know what they're going to implement? Well, no. And like in Ursec in Uruguay, a private company, a telecom says, please block these sites that are illegal. Where is the legal control of the state to justify this, the jurisdiction thereof? You cannot work in that way. In the case mentioned by Jorge, I have to disagree. In a pilot test, in a case where we wanted to block the ruling of a local judge, and we're also doing this with illegal gaming. And in the case of child pornography, no blockings are done because Meta and Microsoft and all the companies, TikTok, X, whenever they see child pornography, they themselves block these sites. What we get are requests for IP addresses, and thanks to the collaboration, we have discovered a large number of organizations that have the scourge of distributing child pornography. We conducted a pilot test, and Jorge says that it worked well. As a telecom, we noted that in that football match, the finals of a local match, the TikTok service was affected. And we said that in the document, but nobody pays attention to us. So this only had the duration of the football match, but we found it. There was a blocking to the TikTok service. So the point here is, well, and something else. The ISP. What is the responsibility of the ISP? We provide the infrastructure. I don't see the content. And I think that they found a sort of a palliative solution, and blocking of a football match, as they wish to do, is every couple of minutes. The people involved in the telecom network infrastructure say this affects their networks, it damages their network. But we're already doing our work. All the ISPs to which the pirates joined saturate this network. Many think, well, here those who sell things are the ones who win, but that is by no means the case. We wish to cooperate, we wish to do things correctly. We have to request blocking sites. And let me say this, a blocking was ordered by a civil judge. This is Dr. Nobili. It's an interesting case, and he analyzed the situation correctly. And he says these are blockings, not IP blockings. And he mentioned these are temporary blockings. He orders the INACOM to notify prosecutor, because this is a crime. But we cannot mix things. So the provincial prosecutor cannot order blocking at national level, and a civil and commercial federal judge cannot investigate a crime. So I think this is a topic that has many sides to it. Where are the major content hostings sites? And let me finish with this. The Budapest Agreement was signed by many countries. In Article 10, it refers to intellectual property rights crimes. So we have to proceed rapidly with other jurisdictions and other countries. If someone is hosting illegal content, one is Cloudflare, and we have to block those contents at origin. Thank you, Sergio. Many ideas to figure out solutions and to work jointly. Now let us go to the second round. I will now ask specific questions to each of the members of the panel, but please feel free to react to the comments made by others. In the case of Gonzalo Balseiro, Gonzalo, you mentioned that URSEC develops different types of blockings, and you also said that this is not only about piracy, which is a core topic here of this panel, but also crimes associated to illegal gaming. And my question is regarding when you apply these blockings, with what other players do you work, and what are the guarantees of the due process? Is there some kind of list on the blockings implemented by URSEC? What can you comment on in this regard? We have authorized these types of blockings. We have, for example, minorities or protection of children or adolescents. This is done by orders of the judge. We have a list of blocked sites, for example. Until 2024, 1,500 international gaming platforms have been blocked, so that you have an idea. That is in the first case. In the second case, illegal dissemination of subscriber TV, we have blocked about 600 websites between 2023 and 2025, and we haven't had any reports or observations that difficulties have arisen. Of course, in most cases, we block URLs. So this is something to take into account what Ernesto was saying. The URLs are blocked. Maybe this is not so meaningful in the sense that they can migrate very rapidly to disseminate this type of illegal content. In the case of sports events, we haven't had any major blockings. This is the most recent one. What we do have is we keep a record of the websites. This is available in URSEC's website. In that sense, and based on what Sergio was saying, I think it was, he said that, well, he was against administrative blockings. I also am against administrative blockings. But blocking URLs or IPSs requires some kind of technical specificity. This in the sense that the regulator has experts. If we think about the judges, what they should be requesting is the use of experts, and this would make the situation more complex. But this is a legal issue that requires discussing. But I think we have to refer to what Ernesto was saying, whether it is useful or not to proceed to do blockings. So insofar as operators present the report this, but we block those sites where we have evidence that, in fact, illegal dissemination of services is taking place. For example, subscriber TV. We verify that before we make the decision. So insofar as this is effective and useful to the operators, and insofar as we are fighting something that is illegal, we are at your disposal for that, because that is the mandate that we have to do so.
So that is the well, what I can say based on my colleagues' interventions. Thank you for keeping it short as well. I will give you 3 to 4 minutes each, so we have some more time for additional questions. Let's go back to Jorge from a more regional perspective. What could you say about what leads to regional blockings, and how could you respond to the other ideas shared in the panel? Okay, so Sergio mentioned whether the blocking needs to be administrative or judicial, and that doesn't matter whether the blocking is effective or not, and we are not defining whether the blocking is effective or not. In Argentina, in particular, we have well sentences from the regular justice, and there's never been decisions by the regular justice. In addition to being president of the alliance and having worked as a programmer, I work as an operator now and an internet service provider in Brazil and in the rest of the region. We are a multinational and we defend blockings because blockings also affects the network, the providers, internet service, and the services that companies provide. So there's a direct impact to companies in the piracy directly affects day-to-day operations, network, and that is also true. And with regards to the blockings that happened in Argentina, a static blocking defined for certain IP addresses during 2 hours during a football game. This is only manifested by Telecom on different IPs in Argentina. It was just a manifestation. It was a blocking on TikTok. It was said that it was 5 minutes or 2 hours, but there was no technical evidence with any specific blocking. But it was never proved by the not taken to justice. So, with regards to the regional landscape and what leads to blocking, is because of different concerns that governments have over piracy. The International Intellectual Property Organization drafted a report about on international blockings internationally, where it says that practically all countries enforce blockings around the world. It is a common practice in most countries. The report was published earlier this year, and it is considered as an effective measure. And blockings are enforced without specific regulation in different countries. The problem is so severe that countries have needed to find different solutions without waiting for specific regulation to be passed. They are adapting current or existing solutions to enforce those blockings. We have had problems, for example, in Brazil, where devices that are uploaded with services that are not standardized by Anatel, and today we also consider about judicial blockings after breaches of intellectual property, but we also have illegal download of malware and so on. So it's not just about IP, but also money laundering, impacts on devices, promotion of crimes. There is a breach in quality standards, licenses, taxes are no pay, and so on. So there's a whole set of crimes, and many countries are taking this solution, not just about this particular problem around IP, but also the impact on users. Piracy has also a big impact on the entire ecosystem. And I think this is the main motivation that authorities are having to do so. If we compare what happened in 2020 and now in 2025, over only 5 years had gone by. But in 2020 in Latin America, there were virtually no countries that would enforce blockings, and at nights the opposite now. There's probably no country that has never enforced a blocking, whether it's been after legal proceedings or through the administrative route. Okay, thank you, Jorge, and also for explaining how complex these crimes are when trying to, well, tackle these crimes with blockings. Ernesto, considering the different opinions about blockings and how complex the problem is, can you explain what is the role that LACNIC has in network operation and in content related operations? Thank you, Rocio. The role that we have is quite simple. We are an internet address registry. We keep a registry of the entities that have been assigned the addresses. So that is the first role that we play. We are a registry. We have a list of all the entities that have received our allocations or assignments, the assignment of the IP addresses that need them for network deployment. So that is our main operational role, and that is the scope of our work. We do not have a say in other activities, not in terms of network operation or in the activities of the entities that receive these addresses or the content that some of those entities make available online. So our role is just that, keeping an updated record and assigning as effectively and fairly as possible as our community policies dictate, manage the addresses. So in addition to that, we have a technical nature or objective. And yesterday I said that our scope goes beyond sort of basic operations. We also have a virtual campus for training and knowledge sharing. We train judges, we train law enforcement, we train prosecutors to understand how the network works, and for their by better understanding how the internet works, they can fulfill their roles more accurately in terms of fighting crime. Monday morning or yesterday morning, we had a workshop about how the internet works. Around 25 judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement from El Salvador, Mexico, and Costa Rica, among other countries, participated in those workshops. We conduct activities like this all the time together with our colleagues from the technical community, from LACTI LTD also, Rocio, and that, well, is part of our role. That's what we do mainly. What we want is for all stakeholders to be able to fulfill their roles as effectively as possible. And we are also concerned about how blockings are used. As Jorge said, all countries in Latin America use them. And as a solution, this should be a solution to a problem, but it might not be so. Sergio? No, I just will repeat what I said before. Telecom's technical report, in Telecom's technical report, it was proved that TikTok service was affected. I am saying this as a telecom representative. If you want to hear it, you can hear it. If you don't, you don't. We all know, all of us here, we know, and maybe that is the problem that we deal with lawyers. We all know that blocking an IP address has a consequence on legal content, and there's no discussion. As a lawyer, I cannot allow for any jurisdiction to receive these things. We know the jurisdiction to apply it to. We are responding to all blocking requests for illegal gambling that needs to be addressed to the federal justice. Having said that, I will say that we are working on seizing some resources and distributors of Mashi's TV boxes, a very large distributor in Argentina. We have the rights over Lollapalooza and many other music events. We have the rights. We don't ask for blockings. We have started legal proceedings. Telecom to date invested $2.6 million in securing the CDN, which is where pirates get their illegal content from. Now, the technical side says that there's no tool that allows me to fully secure the CDN without pirates having access to those keys, and I am not the best person to describe it, but when there are shows for which we have the rights, or there are very massive shows, we are going to turn on that anti-piracy equipment so they can take very little content. In the last Boca River game, they were not able to steal any CDN content from Telecom. So the question should not be about blocking yes or no, because whether you like it or not, it is here to stay. But the thing is, how do we apply it? I will not go against blockings. I don't want people to think Sergio Perita is against blockings. But how do we enforce them? In Argentina, there are 2,177 ISPs. I don't know how many, but it's ISPs. Is everyone going to comply it? If I block, but my neighbor doesn't, that is just fierce competition. So it's not just it is not as simple, but we need to propose it and we need to do something. That's why I'm saying let's look for the source of illegal content. Let's go beyond it. A prosecutor from Cordoba very recently was able to decipher some cryptocurrency crime in Asia. And how long did it take him? In 1 week to do it all. Okay, so let's say we just go ahead and block, and we can just be at ease and rest assured. But where is the obligation of the ISP to block? The law in Argentina speaks about law neutrality, and I am not saying that the intellectual property law goes below the freedom of expression. I'm not saying that. I want to defend intellectual property, but we need to do it adequately. It is very interesting what you're saying, to go after the source of the illegal content, which is a position that many organizations share. Okay, so let's now hear from Basilio. And if anybody from the audience has a question or a comment, please, you're welcome to just approach a mic. Basilio, you spoke about the workload for ISP when it comes to blocking requests. So I have two questions. One, could you elaborate a little bit further into what are the main challenges that ISPs face? And then, considering the implementation or enforcement of those blockings, what type of collaboration do you expect to receive from other stakeholders that are part of the ecosystem and are involved with the problem? Blockings in Brazil are quite common. There are many every day. And that means that the ISPs have a lot of work.
This also implies concerns at the ISPs, because we're aware that blockings are not fully efficient. Even though you might attempt to block something, some blockings are as follows. You go and block an IP. It is efficient, but it has collateral effects because there are other services behind that IP. But when you're not blocking IPs, and this is something happening a lot, you're blocking URLs or domains. When you block a URL, you don't always have the mechanisms to do those blockings. So as a result, the ISPs might be subject to penalties because in the lawsuits, they understand that they don't have the technical resources to do these things. So what we heard about Ernesto is very important, namely to instruct the people involved in the legal area so that they can better understand how the internet works and how a certain type of blocking is for this address and this other blocking for that other address. We're not against blockings. We know that they are necessary, that there are pirate sites, there is pornography, there are things out there. I have grandchildren and I don't want my grandchildren to see what they shouldn't see in the internet. All this requires the focal points to carry out these blockings, and unfortunately that doesn't always occur in that way. Quite evidently, it is far more difficult when we deal about blockings, because it is as follows. Someone is committing a crime and you are increasing the workload of someone who has nothing to do that to figure out a solution to that crime. But they don't follow the correct path. Evidently, this doesn't occur in the same country. Sometimes the sites are in a different country, so you have to have contact with other legal departments and law enforcement in other countries. We are aware that this is something that is highly complex, but very often that complexity is not done because, of course, it's simpler to just block. So we really have to do that type of full tracking of what is really happening so that an effective solution is found. Likely doing two things, to block, but also to follow the necessary paths to see, to go and figure out what is the problem, what is causing this problem. Thank you, Basilio. With this, we finish the 2 rounds of interventions. Thank you to all the panelists. We still have a couple of minutes for questions and comments from the participants. There are people who work on this topic that have a lot of knowledge, so we open the floor, and I will start with a gentleman over here. Please introduce yourself and we can listen to you. Hello, I am Douglas from MSM. I will speak in Portuguese. Whenever I speak in Spanish, the interpreters scold me. So regarding blocking, I would like to say that we shouldn't proceed to blocking, but we do have to block sites such as child pornography, terrorism, and other crimes. There are some aspects of blockings that are involved regarding financial interests. When there's a financial interest at stake, this shouldn't affect the ISP, as Masilia mentioned. And you asked what should be the role of the ISP in that, for those blockers. I don't know what the role is, but I can say what the role should not be, what the role of the ISP should not be. The ISP is the one that delivers the packets. They shouldn't interfere there. We cannot conduct inspection of the packets. That is not the role we play here in the United States or China, wherever, it doesn't matter. Now, in that context, when we need to figure out a solution to a problem or something that involves money, this has a very significant impact. The Americans say, follow the money. So to follow the money, you have to identify the users or those who originated these illegal streamings. So in those cases, we have something that as carriers or at ISPs are not well positioned. We should more rapidly identify these things following the legal paths in order to then identify these others. But we don't do that rapidly. Sometimes it takes 3 to 4 days. So we are not efficient. We need to improve. But my question is, why do blockings? Why? I mean, well, before that, let me explain a problem we have in Brazil of pirate subscriber TV. If someone pays 30 reales every month, which is $7 or $8, that person receives that money. That money ends up in the hands of someone. Why do you insist in blocking? And why don't you go and find the destination of that money? So this affects the ISPs. And another important thing that is in the midst of that confusion resulting from the blockings, we had a case which was most inappropriate. A root server blocking was requested, a DNS of Google, imagine. So why don't you try to figure out the destination of that money, where that money is going to? So 1 minute each to answer. Ariel? Yes, beyond saying that I agree with the comment made just now, I clearly understand that we are discussing what we have at stake is money. And like he was saying, you have to follow the money to see who benefits from all this. What I want to state clearly, and this was mentioned by Basilio and by Sergio, is that we ISPs lose money with piracy. So we are against piracy. We're absolutely against piracy. But we also understand that we cannot cover the sun with our hands, and the blocking covers the sun with our hands. So what we have to figure out is to have an economic model that is of use to all, because those who purchase piracy are the end users. It's not the ISP. Those who buy piracy are those who decide not to pay for a service because this is available cheaper elsewhere. If there's an economic model that we can have, as was the case with music, where today nobody even downloads music illegally, as was done in the past. You just hire Spotify and the problem is over and they have everything they need. So what we're discussing here is all about money. So each has to defend their own interests, and those who own the intellectual property have to be respected, and I fully agree with that. But this is no excuse to damage the entire chain. We must not confuse things. You're defending an interest, but you shouldn't be affecting the others. We have to strike a balance and find a model where we all earn money and not some have to lose so that others can have this. Thank you. And final participation. Yes, let me add something compared to what Ariel and Douglas said. At Colombia, the ISPs are literally at a crossroads because the persecution of piracy is very big. There are only a limited number of actors interested in the benefits. Specifically, DirecTV some time ago blocked all Cloudflare. They blocked IP addresses with 400,000 sites affected. A judge issued that order. Nobody said anything. Nobody made absolutely no comments. So many ISPs in Colombia are in that situation. Blockings are not a solution. The interested entities have to go behind. What Douglas was saying, what Ariel was saying, they have to follow the money. Where does that money go? And those are the ones that they have to follow and find, and not block content like that. Thank you. Thank you. We have one final virtual participation. Yes, Andres Hirovis is asking, how have you managed the situation where not everyone implements the blockings, like Dr. Sergio was saying, that bad competition? So let's make a final round of comments. 1 minute each. Try to be brief, and maybe we can start with Sergio. Hello. It is quite true that blocking was something that somehow was like a palliative option that discourages, that tends to, but it doesn't solve any problem. This is just something that, and let me clarify, Telecom blocked 2,200 URLs in the year. I have to do that, but we have to see how they are organized, how they request, and so on. So you have to go to the basis of the situation. And I'm always worried because they found it was easy to go there and block the ISP, and that by no means is a solution. We have many different variants. It's not just blockings, but we also behind many more things. For example, things that come through the app and so on. We are doing investigation together with customs to see how we can stop many things. But we now have the position that in Argentina, blocking has to be ordered by a judge. What URSEC does, I also think is serious, because at least I think that the regulator, I think that URSEC's task is being done very seriously. But the situation of Uruguay is different compared to the number of ISPs. They have a greater likelihood that everything can be complied with. We receive the orders from URSEC because we do the blockings in Argentina. Thank you, Sergio. Now we give the floor to Gonzalo from URSEC. Gonzalo. Yes, quite evidently, this topic of following the money and all the rest that was mentioned is quite reasonable. The point here is as follows. If there are accidents on the roads, we're not going to close the roads, or if there are thefts along the roads, we're not going to stop that, just blocking the road. So evidently what we have more available is what one resorts to. And what we have available is the way in which these situations occur. The easiest way is to say, well, let us block this, let us close this road. Quite evidently, that's not the best solution, but that is what we have at hand. So I fully agree with the questions and comments that were made, in the sense that here we have to resort to something else. The point is, how do we proceed? So that is my reflection. Thank you. I already referred to this, and also the concepts go in the same direction precisely. We block things because we have to do so based on the orders we receive from the regulators, but not the regulators, because without the justice and without law enforcement and so on, they have to follow the money. They have to make this solved along other paths. As Ariel said, we are covering the sun with our hand, and that is not a solution. That's a temporary solution.
It will not have a good result. Thank you. Jorge, for your final words. Okay, so trying to recap a little bit of everything, whether there's money, no money, it is a crime and it should be prosecuted as such. It's not just merely an economic aspect. If there is some crime against heritage, it's not just about being money. Any crime should be prosecuted by justice. I don't agree that. It's not just about money. And we are not speaking about the responsibility of ISPs. No one has held them accountable. We're just saying that they are in a better position in trying to solve the problem. Actually, blockings are executed over millions of content through a platform, whether the internet or even social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. They constantly block content through a system and on the cloud. So there are different ways of doing it, but there's a legal obligation to do it. In terms of music, well, music is a different business. There are different costs. It's not comparable. Yes, it's not, the costs about generating music is not the same as audiovisual content or sports or uh, other sporting events. It's a different cost. So we're speaking about different models. I think that is the model that we cannot compare. And David mentioned about Magic TV, or I don't know, George Floyd. I control all the measures, and this is, there was a case of a blocking request in Ecuador, and I warned it. It was a mistake. It was a blocking executed by the sports industry in Ecuador, and we said that it should not have been done. It should not have been done like that. Unfortunately, it did have an impact, but it had nothing to do with direct TV. But please do share the contact with me if you have proof of that. I would be interested in learning about it. And about the organizations following the money in Argentina, we also did this with Telecom. We conducted an operation on August 28th over a pirate operation that was controlled by China. The money flow, the cash flow, everything was targeting China. There were over 6 million subscribers. It's not just about a financial aspect. There is a drain of capitals, tax evasion, there's a breach in personal data treatment. There are many crimes involved. Even payment platforms are controlled from China, and it's a very complex problem. Traceability is very important, but in all cases, from the smallest to the largest pirate, this is all a problem. Different currencies are being used now. Pirates do monetize the crypto assets, for example, and it is a very complex topic that we could discuss for a much longer time. Thank you, Jorge, for your comments. And Ernesto, to wrap up the panel. Yeah, my final words are just to reinforce what we said earlier. Our work focuses on trying to help people understand how the internet works, collaborating with justice, law enforcement, prosecutors in prosecuting a crime. That's why our commitment is to reinforce education, knowledge sharing, information, so the stakeholders can make informed decisions to benefit us all. Thank you all. A big round of applause to everyone.